Is it one of those things where like NBA players want to have rap albums where like people that make recipes are like, in a way, I'm kind of a writer, right? Like, let me try my hand a little bit here. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Anyway, here's my lobster bisque.
It's like there's like two sides of it where it's like if you're reading a technical website and they're actually like you're reading like the Food Lab or something and he's telling you about why and how the recipe's like this. Mm-hmm. That's one thing, but it's like the mommy blogger thing or like the overly eloquent food writer thing where it's like, I don't need you to set the entire scene for how
that's a very,
you made these scones. I just want the fucking scones.
That's like sports writers do that too. The very Bill Simmons thing of like, so I was all with One Dick Phil and Big Tiny over at Manassas, and they were saying Tom Brady doesn't have it anymore. 3,000 words about him and his boys. Anyway, Patriots by 6.
I mean, Kenji also at the Food Lab does the nice thing of a whole article about the science and then just the recipe. Or if you're like, I don't want to read this, you just go to the recipe.
Serious Eats has always done that. I used to write for them, and like we always had that option. Like, there's 2 links to here's the story about the recipe, and here's just the recipe. Like, that's how you should do it. But
that's why, that's why I mostly use Serious Eats. So I love that site.
Yeah, no, they're the best.
Yeah, that's better.
I just wish they had more baking stuff. Stella Parks is amazing. Stella's
awesome.
Yeah, she was actually the person I used for that cake recipe last night, the chocolate cake.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it turned out really well too. It was amazing. I was actually worried it would be overly sweet because buttercream is terrible. And
no, you know buttercream do be like that though.
Oh, did you use like the German buttercream or?
No, I did American just because I wanted something that I knew for sure could pull off because I wanted to make sure the Mariglaze would work at all. I was going to do Italian originally. Or Stella has a new one with like organic powdered sugar that looked cool too.
Interesting.
But I ended up just going the normal one. And I was worried it was going to be overly sweet because American buttercream sucks. And the chocolate cake was awesome.
Watch your fucking tongue.
You have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, when you come at American buttercream, that's all I need to know, motherfucker. You better arm up. I'm high speed, low drag, and you're about to get it.
All right, welcome to another episode of Dumb and Awful. This is Brett.
This is John.
I'm Rob. Don't eat December. Hit me up.
Jeez.
And I'm Anna from the Breadline.
Yeah, so this week we have Anna joining us as our special guest. So we're going to talk about a lot of food-related things today, mostly food-related things. You might have heard from the Breadline pod, which if you haven't listened is awesome. They talk about food-related issues from a leftist perspective. Personal favorite episode is the one about prison system food. There was a bit in there about the sheriff who bought a whole tractor trailer of corn dogs, and that's all the inmates ate for a month.
Yeah, but there's also bad things in there you should focus on.
And it sounds like you guys have more on the docket coming soon, Anna?
Yeah, we do. The third and final episode dealing with food assistance should be coming out in the next week. And we are working on getting on a more regular schedule and covering other topics. So I'm going to be looking for some possible interview subjects soon. But we're getting back to work on it.
Oh yeah.
Oh snap!
Oh
that.
God. Jeez, man.
The terrible pun.
I wrote it down, so I was going to do it. I wasn't happy about it. But like the Greatest Generation, I nutted up and I got it done. I'll live with the consequences for this, maybe the rest of my life.
Awesome. So you guys are finishing up the food assistance one. Is there anything else coming up soon that's exciting for you?
We're going to start looking at more food and racial intersections the history of black farming in the U.S. is something we're going to be covering soon.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to get into LGBTQ issues, how they intersect with food and farming as well. So a lot of things up the food chain, more food production side of things for a little bit.
That sounds awesome.
So,
I mean, that's
yeah.
At some point, as my personal suggestion, if you guys talked about Southern food, because there's so many fucked up racial issues with that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's such a complex topic.
Yeah.
It's something that we need definitely some really good guests on to have a conversation about that, because I'm definitely not qualified to say much about it. I'm from Maine, like.
Maine is like
talk about Southern food.
Maine's honorary South, to be honest. As soon as you cross the border to Kittery, you get the shit that New Hampshire didn't even want to allow.
Oh, Kittery is just all strip malls and great seafood.
Shout out to Kittery Trading Post. You know what's up? You can get a snow cone and an assault rifle.
Oh, you sure can. Kittery is a special place. Yeah, the best I can do is I just know to like trust Edna Lewis recipes. That's literally my my relationship with Southern food is defer to Edna.
Yeah, that was my whole childhood. My family's super Southern. I loved it. Actually, since we're talking about it and we're doing a more food related one, let's just everyone's familiarity with food. So this is Brett. I'm gonna call myself an experienced amateur. I bake a lot. I cook a little bit. I'm okay.
It's like I'm pretty utilitarian. Like I know like maybe 2-3 dozen dishes, and I just kind of rotate between them because I'm a programmer. And yeah, at least it's not soylent.
That's true.
I love food more than anyone probably. I don't make it, but I do put it in my trash and then pour detergent on it. I hate 2 weeks in a row to go to the good book, but if you look at First Kings, King Solomon, the famous story of the mothers bringing the baby before him, and he was like, well, okay, if you both want it, we'll cut it in half. And it was, in fact, the mother who loved the baby, more than anyone, that she was willing to let it go. See, in this metaphor, the baby's food. Anyway, it got there.
This is a few too many Bible jokes for.
It's not a joke.
This is his life, John.
Word.
I'm
a professional pastry chef. I make desserts in restaurants and stuff. But I'm.
What's the best dessert?
Pretty lazy as a home cook. The best dessert.
Yeah, I don't have time for nuance.
Period?
Just give me the best dessert, so I can eat that for the rest of my life.
I mean, it depends. It depends how you make it. Like, there's good and bad.
No time for nuance. I got my thumb over seamless.com right now.
Apple pie a la mode. It's fucking apple pie a la mode, and we all know it.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
Good. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's like
if there's one, pie's a good choice.
it's like
that's my favorite. Pie is my favorite thing to make and eat.
Hell yeah! See, you can talk about Southern food. You're good.
That's true. I do. Like one of my pipe dreams one day is to like have a little traveling like van with like an oven in it, and I can travel the country and bake pies with their local produce, and that's it.
That's a really cool dream, actually.
yeah, that's wow.
Like,
that's pretty good. That's
such a high-end version of my idea. If I ever had a food truck, would be to serve just 2 pies, a savory and a sweet every day.
Damn, that's pretty interesting.
That's practical. That's good too. Good too. Like,
never thought about produce though.
I was just going to say, my idea was, what if Asuka Langley came to life? So both of yours is way better.
I just want to say that I don't think I ever bring up anime first on this podcast.
Just gonna put that out there, John. So Anna, you're a professional chef, professional pastry chef, and you were saying you used to work at this restaurant in Boston that I hadn't heard of because I am not a Northeasterner and I'm illiterate about what's out here. It's called Parker House. Is that right?
So I didn't work there, but I worked for a chef who told me the story. I don't know if he had ever worked there before, but he told me, like, Parker House is one of the most famous hotels in the country. That's where Boston cream pie and Parker House rolls, which would be super famous rolls, come from. But they're like this crazy high-end hotel, and he told me that Ho Chi Minh had worked there as a pastry chef at one point, which seems to be true. Like, dude went all around the world cooking on ships and in restaurants and stuff for a while. So he was always trying to get me to make a Boston cream pie with like a Vietnamese coffee filling, which I never did, but
It does sound amazing.
but yeah, it does. Like that sounds awesome. So I should do that at some point. So thanks, Chef John, for the idea, and also, I mean, Parker House. Malcolm X worked there too as a busboy at one point.
Do you think they were friends?
No, it was it was like 60 years later.
But do you like to just sometimes imagine them as friends?
I was trying to find more information about it, and I did find like this New England folklore blog that says that's a lot of activism coming out of one kitchen. I think the moral here is to always tip your server well, because you never know when they might start a revolution.
That's
and
awesome.
I think that's just a good lesson for life. That's a good philosophy to espouse.
I mean, honestly, that sounds like a good reason to tip them very poorly.
Yeah, I'm an acceleration.
Get some in gear. Like,
fuck them. Be like, comrade, you're gonna thank me later.
Like, leave one of those fake dollars. Like,
yes.
Yeah, just like Karl Marx, 1 billion
So
workers.
instead of religious writing in it, it's just like communist agitation.
I mean, I'm pretty sure all of the DC restaurant scene thing where the right-wing politicians are getting run out is because the restaurant workers are giving a head nod to the Metro DC DSA, and that's why they know, like, Ted Cruz is eating here tonight.
yeah, they've absolutely been like tipping them off and stuff. But there's no other way.
Modern hammer and sickle should be a hammer and spatula.
I wish you were
dead. It totally could be.
No, if those guys at those restaurants aren't to the left in whatever way they realize their political thought, then they're crazy.
The interesting thing is, like, DC had, they passed the tipped wage bill where they were supposed to get a raise, like tipped workers, like servers and bartenders and stuff. It passed by a pretty big margin, and like maps showed that like the working class neighborhoods were the ones that voted for it. So the workers said, give us a raise, and the patrons voted, we don't want you to have a raise, and the owners, and the restaurant owners. And then the DC council overturned it.
They're centrist fucking Democrats. This whole city is
Democrat. They are. It's the biggest illustration of like why voting doesn't necessarily fix things. Like, you voted these people in, and then you voted your will, and then they overturned your will. So you're not supposed to be mad at them.
Yep. No, they all need to burn. Like that's a really unforgivable offense to that any of them should never be able to live down.
Yeah, it's like you're just radicalizing the staff at this point. Like, good job.
That's a net good, honestly.
It is.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be down in DC next week, so hit me up.
Yeah, come drink, John.
I mean, I'm going to be in DC too, maybe, if I figure this out.
If you figure out how trains work, yeah. One day.
Not today.
I can show you guys all the sites of the overpriced restaurants in DC, and then we can drive the 45 minutes outside the city to get the real shit in Annandale.
Yeah, you know where that real shit goes down. Annandale, Maryland.
Annandale, Virginia.
Ah, fuck it. Who gives a shit? Who gives a fuck about where Annandale is? Yo, if you give a fuck, you could dumb and awful at dumbandawful. Just fucking let me know. You don't exist.
Annandale's where all the Korean food is, Rob. I figured you'd be into that.
Ooh. Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I always go where that is. That's fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Annandale has the best food in the region, but it is
sparse.
It is at the edge of the Beltway. It's very far away from the city itself because they've driven out all the immigrant community basically doesn't live in DC anymore. So the DC food scene is designed around corporate cards. So it's good, but never quite as good as the price point.
Yeah, that's like the Delmonico's effect down in Lower Manhattan. Like, they're like, this isn't great, but it's not shit either. Anyway, you got a charge card and work upstairs, so fucking give me your money. There seems to be a mutual respect for that.
The food scene in New York is honestly depressing. It's getting homogenous, and like everyone's trying too hard.
No, I can get Korean avocado toast for $40 if I go out to Flushing. So things are very vibrant here.
Also, everyone has the Korean avocado toast. So,
well, speaking of trying too hard, there was this awesome article on Eater about tech bros getting into bread baking, and no one tries as hard as these fucking nerds.
I bet they're gonna bring a lot to it and not in any way make it suck all of a sudden and run it into the ground. That's my hypothesis. We'll see what happens.
Let's see if you're right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry in advance for my people.
Are you claiming tech bros?
I mean, I kind of have to. I mean, they are like,
no, I get you.
A lot of them.
That's how I feel about the Southern Slavs.
Like, do you do you know how many conversations I've had about Bitcoin? Like,
Jesus Christ.
That's a great sentence. I'm gonna put that on your headstone when you die.
So, for those who don't know what we're talking about, let me give you a few dope quotes. So, essentially, the tech bros always casting about for a way to save their souls because they're being consumed by the garbage industry they're in, have decided to move towards bread baking, specifically sourdough bread. So here's sort of the good quote that describes the situation here. Fred Binnenson, a former VP of data and now a fellow at Kickstarter, real cool guy, created a thorough, detailed spreadsheet that breaks down the timing to bake this country loaf in precise increments down to the minute. There are now high-efficiency tools like the $245 Forno home oven, which absorbs, stores, and radiates heat evenly. If that
like
is
an oven.
Yeah, as if that's somehow an advancement.
No, damn, they created a need I did not know I had that I can fulfill by spending capital.
They are so good at inventing things that already exist.
Justin Lamb, a mechatronics engineer, did an extended experiment with monitoring his sourdough starter through computer vision. The head of communications at Microsoft has, quote, owner of a fine sourdough starter in his Twitter profile.
Yeah, those guys fuck.
I mean, the starter maybe. Like, yeah, it's depressing. Taking all of the fun out of baking. I can understand having the like primal urge to do something with your hands when you're on computers all day. Like, I get that. That's part of why I do what I do. But then they immediately suck everything that's like therapeutic about baking out of it, like feeling the dough and knowing and being comfortable with it, and turn it into just another spreadsheet, and that's so alien.
Yeah, it's a. Go ahead, John. What's up?
I was going to say, Rob, this is a lot like when you're talking about MMR in Dota and whatnot. Like, it seems like the same kind of thing. Like, these people could just be like, they could have just done the normal thing nerds do and just get really into video gaming and then try and like science the hell out of that. But instead they're making bread, which I guess is a little better, but oh man, it's just soulless.
Yeah, no, this reminds me of people that like actually, and we have this in New York, and I know this secondhand, so I'm one dimension removed from how dorky this is. But like tech bros will show up to Dungeons and Dragons get-togethers and just bring in these character sheets that are super min-maxed so that they get every possible like PowerPoint out of it. And when people are like, "Oh, fare thee well, sire, we shall be at the tavern," they're like, "Yo, I'm going to run out of my buff in 30 minutes. Let's go." This is the bread equivalent to that.
It's a good way to describe it. These dudes are trying to min-max bread. That's fucking weird. That's like, here's... This Binnison dude talks about it. Bread, quote, has all these degrees of freedom. That's a term people use in algorithms where there are lots of different possible ways that something could be implemented. You can do creative coding, and at the end of the day, you're just like, I made a form on a web page. It doesn't have an audience that is going to viscerally appreciate it like a loaf of sourdough. Yeah, the visceral part of it, dude, is the part where it's the therapeutic, the sort of you're connecting to this practice that has existed for millennia. Don't be a fucking weirdo and turn it into a science project. Like, the part of this that frustrates me is that they're approaching every hobby the same way they approach their work life, which is to act like a robot. When the reason you're trying to find these hobbies in the first place is because you are an emotional being and you need some outlet that's not another fucking robotic approach to it. And baking is a good fucking outlet, but it doesn't work if you turn it into a mathematical equation, because you are never going to capture all of the different factors in the environment that make a cake perfect or piece of bread perfect.
Yeah, well, bread especially, you have things like wild ferments. You can't control every aspect of it. You can't control the humidity of the room. You can't control the exact temperature of any given room. Like, there's a point in the article where Chef Robertson from Tartine in San Francisco, which is like, it's this sourdough bakery, and that's kind of why they've all latched onto it. It's right there in San Francisco. But they're they're coming up to him on the street and saying, like, but what if the temperature is 2 degrees off? And he's like, I don't know. Like, they're literally bothering the man. Like, he's like, you can't just tell me the bread is good. Like,
or you just get experience. Like, it's a lot of, there's a reason why anything made by a grandma who's been cooking her whole life tastes 1,000 times better than what you're going to make. Just a lifetime of wisdom and experience will make the end product better, right? Like, grandma magic is a fucking thing for baking, and no one can convince me otherwise. That's why Southern food from an old grandma is 1,000 times better than anything I could ever make.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the grandma cooking thing too, because that's another thing that keeps coming up in this article, is that the differences in gender and the way that men and women are, like, approaching the recipes, and how, like, making bread is still seen as something that's a little bit more masculine than making pastries and making desserts, which is still seen as somewhat feminine, even though a lot of the most famous, like, European pastry chefs are men.
Yeah,
and it's just frustrating that there's still so much gender, and then you have, like, any famous male chef, and he's going to talk about how great his grandma's food was, you know. And it's such
there's this interesting
still
through
so
line,
sexist,
both in this article, and I mean, I think it's reflected at large in the industry too, of the difference in gender dynamics and how people approach food, where if you're a man, you automatically get this level of respect. So Tartine, this bakery that started it all, it's run by a couple, right? And the wife is the one doing everything but the bread, essentially. So the original article they got, the original description they got from, the original review that they got, which was very complimentary. Mark Bittman wrote a nice thing about them. It was about her, Liz Pruitt. There it is.
Yeah.
So Liz Pruitt is the one making all of the French style pastry, which is incredibly complicated. She's the one who Mark Bittman devotes most of his really amazing review to, and then he sort of like offhandedly mentions this dude Chad Robertson, her husband, who does the bread, and then later he publishes a book and that blows up. So to this day now, their bakery is now being discussed as his thing, right? This thing that he created because of the bread, and the same thing happened previously with the whole no knead bread recipe thing. A woman, Suzanne Dunaway, wrote an entire book on it in '99. No one noticed. It got no fanfare. And then in 2006, Mark Bittman writes about this dude, Jim Leahy, who has a no-knead bread recipe, and that blows up, right? And you see
That's good bread.
It is. Both of those are good. I've used both the book and his recipe, and they're both awesome, especially because I'm lazy.
Nice.
But you see it over and over again both in this article, and again, I think it reflects a broader issue here, which is when a man starts talking about these things or gets involved in this world, suddenly it's considered, now it's interesting. Now all of these bros in Silicon Valley, it's good for them. So when Robertson wrote his book about bread, then now it's a big deal. because this guy wrote a book for us, helping explain how to do this shit, which is infuriating and ridiculous because they're just ignoring a huge portion of the pastry world, of the professional pastry chef world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what happens. It's with female chefs, with pastry chefs, with bakers. It's not a big deal until a guy does it. It's like we were talking about Southern food earlier, and I said I love Edna Lewis, and it's funny because when I was looking for a recipe, the first thing I did was I grabbed Sean Brock's cookbook, and I was like, this recipe is ridiculously technical, and I don't have these ingredients. Let me see if Edna Lewis has a recipe, and she did, and it was freaking awesome. Like, it's so frustrating that's perpetuated by this, even unintentionally, just that it's like these reclusive male circles where things just keep, it's a feedback loop.
Yeah, but Anna, do you ever just like bite into a piece of barbecue and go like, damn, did a mysterious ass man make this? I can taste the difference.
This barbecue this was touched by a woman. This is unclean.
This barbecue's a little too emotional.
You really think that the difference in barbecue is regional, but it's not. It's 100% gender. Sorry, guys.
Barbecue is 100% gender.
This is a whole new approach to barbecue that I've never thought about till now.
It's like an old English, like, you know, you have to, if it's the blood moon, the women have to be sent away or they'll spoil the milk, like they'll ruin the barbecue.
No, they gotta stand by the smoker for the full 18 hours. This is perfectly formulated to trigger people on the right, being like, hey, you know your barbecue? It's gendered now. Hey!
Gender reveal barbecue.
So the article even mentions this, that these bros just like walk in and elevate other men. And the quote was like, these tech bros who often unknowingly operate in closed loop communities where men elevate men. Quick pause here. There's no unknowingly. People have been really fucking clear that you only interact with other bros, you weirdos. Like you know what's happening. You just choose to keep doing it because you're comfortable. Anyway.
No, I'm pretty sure they literally just ignore all criticism and only care about what other pros say. So, yeah, they actually have not noticed it.
Counterpoint, and look, now to play devil's advocate here, is there any chance that they'd be open to women, but they go, yo, all you guys do is talk about JavaScript and sourdough. I'm fucking bouncing.
At that point, I agree with the women. Like, why bother interacting with them at that point?
I mean, there are a lot of women who only care about like JavaScript or baking or whatever. It's just I guess most of them do actually have like some sort of hobby outside of that, which does make you a bit different than the tech bro.
And here's the real important bit. Most women, because of the way our culture trains the various genders, are capable of baseline emotional interaction and have a baseline emotional intelligence that these tech bros fucking lack. In all things.
Hey,
I don't follow.
Yo, this guy keeps trying to red pill me on Ezekiel bread. I think I'm just going to leave.
Like, the whole tech community is an entire community that desperately needs just the basics of, like, recognizing their own emotions. I feel this way when I do this thing. Like, yeah, no, you guys just need to figure it out. It's a little scary. I get it. Masculinity is broken, so we're all flying blind here, and no one wants to explain to you that there are more emotions than hungry, horny, and angry, of which only one of those is an emotion. But, you know, probably the right time to start figuring it the fuck out. You can do mathematical research on it, guys. Just make the attempt to connect with anything other than a goddamn spreadsheet on how to do any activity in your life.
See, and this is why the getting them into anime helped a bit, because
oh yeah, here we go. I'm shadowboxing right now. I'm killing it.
I mean, it just does give them a venue into fiction that does at least often have some kind of emotional pull, which you're definitely not getting from what they get otherwise. Of course, it doesn't really work most of the time, which is why we have so many anime Nazis, but...
Oh my God, John.
Sorry. Sorry, if we start talking about tech bros, I've got a lot pent up inside, and it's just going to kind of explode out.
Go off, King.
Yeah, does anyone else want to use slurs while we're in the non-publishable bit of this?
Wait. Did I use a slur?
Go for it, John.
Did I use a slur? I don't think I did.
No, but if you've got one, let's.
Oh, no.
No, I'm saying there's no possible way this anime chunk is making it.
I don't know. I kind of love it.
Oh, fuck. All right.
I
This
love
is
that
all
he
your
started
fault.
with. I love that he started with, no, this is why anime is important. But it's not working. They're all Nazis.
I mean, it gets some of them out. Like, that's all you can hope for.
I just like to point out that this conversation started, like, just so how far we've fallen. It was started on, if I'm correct, the creation of sourdough bread as refutation of the determinist metaphysics of Laplace's demon, i.e., the grandmother's hands and the unknowability of space. And now we're on anime is important because it makes Nazis. Wait, hold on. Let me...
I'm just saying the Nazis were being made anyway.
Thank you for that, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
I will say the other little bit of this is these dudes are inserting themselves into the baking world and they're posing as experts because, of course, if you are an expert at coding, you're an expert at everything. That's how that works.
Definitely.
But one of the other really awesome bits in here is that they're all terrified of being emasculated because they bake. Like, just fucking terrified of it. This dude Robertson talks about it like, women are more matter of fact with the bread recipe. They just make it. Yeah, that's what you do with recipes, Robertson. You fucking make them.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to breaking it down into its constituent parts and putting it on a spreadsheet and roll testing.
I gotta make this as scientific as possible, lest someone question the alphaness of my job as UX developer at Google.
Like, what are you going to do if you give your colleague a slice of bread and he asks what the exact hydration level was and at what temperature was your second ferment? I mean, if you don't know the answer, you're done with this company.
Yeah, you're never gonna fuck again.
So, quick story, because this does hit home for me. I got really into baking basically since I was a kid because my mom bakes a lot and my grandma bake a lot because they're Southern. But I didn't start baking weekly until I was in the military and I was stationed in Germany. And I was on night shift in Germany in a small town, so there's nothing to do past like 8 o'clock. And we had rotating weekends, so you didn't even have the same days off as your friends. Like if you did, that was a huge event where like you definitely plan a whole thing around it. So usually you're on your own in the middle of nowhere for 15 hours with nothing to do. So I would just bake all the time and I'd try new recipes and I'd take them into work. And at first, there was a little bit of weirdness where people are like, why is this guy bringing in cakes and pies? But the food was good. So all of the younger people, which was most of the unit, most people were under 24, 25, they would just shut up and eat it. My biggest issue early on was actually that all of the kids from small towns in the Midwest were terrible at trying new stuff. So I'd have to convince them, like, I know this sounds a little weird because it incorporates 2 new flavors, but like, I promise you it's good. Just give it a shot. And so that worked fine. But the crusty old sergeants, the dudes in the like 40s to 50s, were always a little weird about it. And then one time I brought in chocolate cupcakes with a raspberry jam filling and a raspberry mascarpone whipped cream frosting. And they were delicious. But color theory here, raspberry's red, mascarpone and whipped cream are white.
That checks out.
Which makes pink, right? So it's pink icing. And so I sit down, I bring the cupcakes in, I sit down and people are eating them. And this master sergeant leans over and he's like, so what are they pink? I was like, I explained color theory to him just to be a dick. And he was like, no, I know that, but like, come on, like, why are they pink? And I was like, again, red plus white. He was like, you know what I mean? Come on, man, like, why are you making pink cupcakes? It's like, listen here, master sergeant, why don't you try them? And if you still have dumbass questions, we can talk about them at that point. And he tried one and then apologized, and it was awesome.
I just realized for the first
Your
time
face.
ever that your master sergeant was hitting on you. You mentioned that his you didn't say it this time, but he had his boot up on the desk and he was going, "Come on though. Why are you making it pink?" And you were just so clueless. Oh, you're the villain in the story.
Oh no. Well, he was married, and I don't fuck with that.
In that case, it definitely could have happened.
So the whole them being terrified of women thing and being terrified of being emasculated because they bake is so inherently absurd to me, because it's food. It's like the fat kid in me is like, who gives a shit? Just enjoy the tasty food. Enjoy the fact that you found something that like you enjoy, that's a creative outlet that is also tasty. And don't be weird tech bros about everything. Just calm the fuck down about it. Oh, here it is. This dude's talking about his baking. It's like, quote, "My girlfriend made this point that was like, maybe sourdough is interesting to male nerds because it's this way to be precise in cooking that doesn't involve pastries, which has this very gendered association."
Yeah, I don't want anyone to think I'm gay.
That's what he said. His poor girlfriend is like, "Sure, dude, it's super masculine." Yeah,
He went on the record with a journalist and said, "I'm afraid of croissants." And no, I won't say it croissant because then you're super gay.
Listen, I'm also afraid of croissants, but just because that dough takes forever to make.
Brother, ain't that the truth?
They're a pain in the ass.
One last thing before we move on, because the term that these people use on social media made me gag a little. And this whole opening is basically rich, bored people trying to find new shit to do.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember this. Yep.
So it starts with this is how this thing opens. Your local bakery likely sells decent loaves of it. Your favorite farm-to-table restaurant is charging for it. And if you keep the company of millennials with sufficient disposable income and leisure time...
Oh, by the way,
sure...
yes, I, as a millennial, definitely have a favorite farm-to-table restaurant, and I spend apparently sufficient disposable income and leisure time with my millennial pals. Continue. So far, you're checking all the boxes.
You're surely fewer than 2 degrees of separation from a sourdough bread baking hobby.
That's a scary thought. Continue.
These well-off, internet-raised 20 and 30-somethings
wait, what? Who are these well-off 20 and 30? God damn it.
I mean, I guess the tech bros, right?
Literally just tech bros.
Yeah.
These internet-raised 20 and 30-somethings have turned to baking bread to self-impose a little offline time. It can take upwards of 40 hours to make just one loaf.
Girl, same.
To get closer to their mythical human roots, to go back to a time when everything took forever and nothing could be seamless. If you didn't know about this new offline hobby, don't worry. It's being obsessively documented online. Crumbshots, images of the interior texture of a loaf of sourdough, are now pandemic on social media, as novelty milkshakes once were.
Oh, I'm dabbing my brow with a seersucker sponge right now.
That's the first time I've heard anyone say crumb shots, and it's hysterical.
Yeah, the best part is that you're saying, oh, it's this great way to get your people offline, and then it's like, oh, and they're all, of course, it's all going on social media.
Everything is documented.
Yeah,
every single aspect.
He didn't even make it through the rest of the paragraph to be like, psych, it's definitely going to dominate your life online.
Of course.
Not for nothing. Crumb shots are now as pandemic on social media as novelty milkshakes once were. A, it's a reference I don't get.
That is a curse sentence.
B, calling something a pandemic of crumb shots is just... That's obviously terrible writing. That's a cursed turn of phrase. That said, it will 100% be slightly amended. The title of a new project I'm working on. I will not be talking about it here.
The first time someone said it, they went and high-fived the dude next to him. Because we know exactly what they mean when they're saying that.
Oh, when you search Instagram for crumb shots, it's just a series of what are clearly the hands of white men holding sourdough bread.
The big hands. You can see how large and manly their hands are. They like hold out 2 halves of a perfect loaf.
It's funny too. That's such a rookie mistake because actually the large hands makes the crumb shot look smaller.
So you're saying they should all get their Asian wives in there?
Oh, Jesus.
It's slur time yet again.
All right.
All right, I think yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, that's.
That was good. We can end on John's slur. We need John to be like, I'm Asian. It's okay.
I'll save that for my defense. I actually listened to some of that, and boy, I went, man, do I sound white. Like you never really notice it until you listen to a recording of yourself, and then I was like, holy shit, I sound white.
You were talking about those lion head meatball things. Those sound amazing. You gotta share that recipe, man.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, it's basically you just take like pork and mix in a bunch of tofu, so the meatball puffs up really nice.
Oh, that's how I make dumpling filling.
Yeah.
Half tofu, half ground pork. Oh, the best.
Yep.
I've never done that. Tofu with the dumpling filling, but that sounds awesome.
Yeah, adds a lot of moisture.
Yep. Yes.
Clever.
Yeah. It adds a lot of sponginess to it that like Americans use breadcrumbs for it instead. But
Yeah, which dry it out. So I would rather do the soy for that. Do you guys have a specific sauce for the meatballs too?
I mean, I just take use like a chicken broth base and then just add a bunch of like soy sauce, salt, and spices to it.
See, that part's fascinating to me. That like depending on your cultural background, the way your default recipe and sauces work looks so different, right, than other people's. I don't know. That stuff, I love that shit. Like I didn't have a dumpling until I was like 18 or 19. And my mom cooks. Oh. My mom is also like pretty open to new foods and she always trying new things. But like we just didn't really get to dumplings until I was in high school, like senior in high school.
I didn't. That wasn't something we had in Maine at all. I didn't have a dumpling until I came to live in New York.
Exactly, and it makes me sad because they're easily one of my favorite foods of all time. Dumplings are perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, we're just talking about dumplings.
Dumplings, pretty good. Pretty
Soup
good cheap
dumpling,
food.
Better.
It's no Peking duck. It's no Korean barbecue, but a nice dumpling on a Sunday afternoon. I'll take it.
I don't know. Dumplings versus Peking duck's a hard one. I do love dumplings.
Are you out of your mind?
Ducks are
that's like
amazing.
caviar
Duck
versus Rice Krispie treats. Like they're both fine, but
duck is what got me to renounce vegetarianism. So.
yeah. What?
Oh yeah. Here's the logic. It's the difference between a movie that's amazing that you watch once a year and one that you watch over and over again. I can have dumplings every fucking week and they're amazing. Peking duck is like a every 6 months to a year kind of thing, right? So do I want the thing that's incredible that I have a lot, or do I want the thing that's incredible that I have every once in a while? And like, I don't know. I really like watching Groundhog Day 30 times a year. It's amazing.
Very normal behavior. You win the argument.
Groundhog Day is a good tech bro movie because once again it shows someone reliving the same day over and over again for God knows how long, never learning anything, trying to create the perfect day.
Yeah, they're just constantly tweaking little things on the stupid spreadsheet.
Oh, way to ruin the movie, John.
Yep, you're welcome. Yep.
Although my favorite thing to do while watching is figuring out how long he's actually been trapped there. Be like, all right, he's a master piano. That's at least a decade.
Yeah, somebody figured it out.
Oh, I'm sure. And I think Harold Ramey or whatever, who wrote it, actually said something about it. But I was like, no, fuck that. This is my own fan theory.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure this out for myself.
That's cool. Let me continue to ruin it. Groundhog's Day is a pickup artist fantasy because the premise is that with enough time you can figure out exactly the combination to the safe lock that is that big-haired bitch's pussy.
But the combination was being a better person. The combination was being like an emotionally capable, better human.
Well, that's Hollywood fantasy for
Well,
you.
I guess the ends justify the means for this guy, huh?
If pickup artistry was people actually becoming better humans, and they're like, man, women are more attracted to me now that I have emotional regulation and the ability to connect on a deeper level.
He spent 15 years learning French and playing piano so he could fuck in his endless day.
Yeah, but it didn't work until he actually became a decent person, which is sort of the point. He tried to build the perfect key and it didn't work. And then once he finally gave up and actually improved as a human, suddenly she was interested.
Brett, do you want the dark answer here?
Oh, I guess.
I love that we use the term dark 40 times in episode.
Well, it's because it's because the pickup artist thing is them improving as people. They're learning They're learning anything about fashion. They're cleaning themselves properly. They're at least talking and listening to women, even if they're doing it to try and advance like a mathematical formula of how to get laid.
PUA.
That's still improving compared to what they were doing before.
It's Pickup Apologia featuring John.
Fuck me. Leave all the anime and cut that out.
Brother, you made your bed.
John's a reactionary pickup apologist.
Things John likes: anime, pickup artistry,
Jill Stein.
barbecue where Jill Stein, barbecue where a man clearly touched it.
I mean, I'm from Boston, so we're making barbecue the worst. Like it's wrong.
If someone gave me
I don't
Boston
know.
barbecue, I'd throw it in the garbage.
I have never thought about barbecue from Boston before, and I'm really angry that I have to think about it.
It's just a potato with sriracha on it.
There's a restaurant by me called Tennessee's Barbecue that they make a great burrito of pulled pork. It's fantastic.
What? I don't want to reject
What
that.
I want is a pulled pork burrito from Boston.
That's a fucking cursed dish right there.
I mean, it is actually pretty good, but my mother went to Houston and brought back some barbecue last year, and after eating it, I went, okay, yeah, you're fully right. We do have utterly lousy barbecue, where 3-day-old reheated is so much better than whatever I've had locally from like 20 different restaurants.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Plus, yeah, of course it still tastes decent. Pulled pork is fucking delicious. Even if you fuck it up, it's still okay. And then a burrito is also good. So like, yeah, I get why it's still edible, but it's not barbecue.
They've really given themselves several layers of protection against it tasting poor. The pulled pork and the burrito that can only be there for self-defense. It's not like they came up with that and we're proud like, as fucking two things we do in Boston, championships and pulled pork burritos. Hey, what's up to Somerville?
Oh man, Boston would be so much cooler. Listen, I'm just going to go to the Parker house, and then after having my incredible socialist dessert, I'm going to go get some pulled pork burritos.
The perfect day in Boston, Massachusetts.
And then hopefully the Patriots lose on the same day. That's the perfect day. So while I would love to make this a food-only episode, there was a pretty big piece of news that came out this week that deserves to be talked about. While I am, in general, a pretty garbage leftist, the one thing that always gets me going is labor issues.
Also, lowly anime for some reason. I just feel like I should bring that up so you're not lying.
Thank you for that correction. So this week, GM announced that they're going to do these massive layoffs. They're going to lay off about 14,000 people, shut 3 big factories and 2 smaller facilities, which is huge news, and this is massive. I just want to give a quick overview of what GM's been doing since that bailout, so you get a sense of how utterly fucked up this is. So in 2008, the U.S. bailed them out with $51 billion. We got back about $39 billion of that. UAW agreed to a ton of cuts to dental and eye care. New higher wages got scaled back. Instead of annual raises, they're on fucking profit sharing, 401ks instead of pensions. The big one was they agreed to not strike, which massively reduced labor costs.
Yikes.
Yeah, it moved the break-even point for GM down to by like 6 million cars. It reduced it, even though labor is only like 10% of the vehicle cost. In 2013, the U.S. sold the last of its GM stock. In 2014, Mary Barra became the first female CEO of GM and of any global automaker. And they happened to do this really positive thing at the same time that it turned out that there was this big ignition switch scandal where a bunch of vehicles they made from 06 to 08, the ignition switch would occasionally just shut off and cause people to die. 13 people died from that. Because of the fact that they went through bankruptcy, they got to avoid all litigation over that. So great timing for them. And then just since Trump became president, they got $500 million from the tax cuts. People think they lost upwards of $700 million from this Trump trade bullshit. So it's been a real up and down for them. And now they're cutting 15% of their workforce. They're shutting down factories in Detroit, the Detroit Hamtramck facility, Oshawa, Ontario, about 2,500 people in Canada. So the rest of the 12,000 are in America. Lordstown Assembly in Warren, Ohio, which is going to destroy that town. And then 2 smaller facilities in Baltimore and Warren, Michigan.
Yeah, that's going to be old Wild West ghost town level shit that's about to hit Lordstown.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine 14,000 people are suddenly unemployed in your town of, I don't know, 15,000. I don't know who's in Lordstown. I'm not going to find out.
Exactly. And then just to sum up how fucked this is, their stock price went up by about 7% immediately on the news.
Yeah, all glory to the shareholders.
Oh, they cut costs, you know? Delivering better.
Commendable.
This one's really frustrating. These haven't hit yet. So the media at large took a bunch of different approaches to this. Some people blame Trump because of the tax cuts and then the trade war bullshit. Some people went like, oh no, this is just smart. To the Chicago Tribune, which put out this editorial saying what's good for GM and its employees is making steady profits. And they had this quote in there about it where it would be helpful if Trump recognized that being president doesn't make him economy czar. He can levy tariffs or otherwise badger CEOs, but he can't force companies to continue to operate factories that aren't profitable. Employers will do what's best for their interests because that's how they stay in business, and not incidentally, how they pay competitive salaries to their workers.
Yeah, except that like literally hasn't happened. That's sort of the whole point. Thanks for the take though. What was it Chicago Tribune editorial board? So they're the bad paper in Chicago, and their take though, while shitty, is enjoyable, but only because I personally love watching one dumbass own another dumbass by being a dumbass. Like he started like, oh, you can't just levy and badger CEOs because, you know, employers will do what's best for their interests. That's how they stay in business. Incidentally, how they pay competitive salaries to their workers. Again, by the end of his paragraph, he's already stated something that is never going to happen and refutes everything he said prior. But he just likes sounding smart about it. I don't know. That's just, to me, there's something there that I hate.
There's so many things in that one that I hate.
It's like it's because it's written, I think, in the sort of pedantic editorial style, where he's just like, actually, sex is not when one pees in another's butt, but rather when one defecates in the other's vagina. It's like all the terminology is there, but he's just a pedantic dumbass. He's as dumb in his economic theory as the people he's criticizing, like the president. Only he just uses the right words, so people go like, got him.
Yeah, I was just looking at that piece, and it does conclude with what's good for General Motors is good for the country.
That is so it's almost like it's just a patently deranged fantasy to think that the free, unfettered, invisible hand of the market is just going to automatically produce positive material outcomes for exactly the number of people living in our country. Like, it's almost like the system.
It's outdated. It's like outdated data. It's everything. Nothing can continue the way it has been. So
exactly,
it's like weird dream data, like as if the system isn't predicated on some people getting fucked over for the benefit of others. What the exact number of people our economy is going to take care of is our citizen count. Like this, and the guy argues that here. He's just like, yeah, well, it's actually good for those 14K to be out of work because I don't know. Stock prices are good. Anyway, sometimes you can pee in the butt too.
Well, I mean, Fox Business followed this up with one of their fucking hosts saying, being worried that this might push people towards socialism now.
They should keep saying things like that. It's totally not terrible.
Damn, if we keep fucking up, people are going to want a non-fucked up version. Anyway, that's all. Thoughts and prayers that never happens.
Keep doing the free. Please keep giving it free advertising.
Yeah, no, it's a continuous thing. Fox News is the best proponent of socialism in like media in the US.
They really are. It's amazing.
This guy's argument for socialism was amazing too. You could see him connecting the dots where he's like, well, I mean, socialists will get elected because American companies are, quote, posting record earnings and firing people. Yes, that is accurate.
That's how that happens.
Yeah. It's almost like earnings and positive outcomes for labor aren't connected in the current system that we live in. It's crazy how that works.
I like, though, that it's not like this is new information that they're fretting about. They're fretting about the fact that their dipshit rubes are starting to slowly absorb, like a rock that's been left on the beach for thousands of years. Finally, some of that life-giving water is permeating its porous surface.
You say that, but I don't really blame those workers, because the problem is, it's like with the coal thing we've discussed before. It's like it's not that they're buying the Republican talking point. It's just that the Republicans are at least giving them a talking point. The Democrats are offering them fucking nothing.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Vox had an interview with a woman at, I think it was the Detroit factory that's shutting down. And she said that, well, one, Trump had visited there recently to say like, oh, all these jobs, whatever garbage he usually spouts about manufacturing jobs. And she said half of the people there were still hoping that Trump was going to swoop in and save them somehow. And that's just heartbreaking. They just want someone to help them. And Trump is the only one who even acknowledged their existence. So that's who they're hoping for.
Yeah, they're really choosing between like the Republican plan of, it don't cost a cent to do racism, and the Democratic plan of, we don't really have anything to offer you at all, materially speaking. So,
well, no, they're offering them a tax break on the student loans they'll need to take for retraining in something that is definitely not going to be in like fucking, where is this, Lordstown, Ohio?
Yep.
Yeah. By the way, I looked. Their population's like 3,000 people. So.
It's basically the entire factory and associated businesses. That whole town, it will be shuttered if the factory goes under. Like the whole town's fucked.
Yeah. Well, what if I went to my Uncle Donald and I sat him down and I said, look, it's the future now. You got to learn HTML5 and Perl. That way you can program the back end of a web page on Alibaba that sells mechanical cats to Thai people. That's your job now.
But one of the articles mentioned something about like there are jobs, and it's like there's no reason to keep production in America when they're selling, like they're moving production to China and stuff. They're making most of their sales there. They don't make any money if they're exporting everything.
Yeah, they
like it's just mathematically it doesn't make any sense for anyone for them to keep it here.
Yeah, I think it was last quarter they sold more cars in China than they did in America.
Yeah, it's like, so I mean, like, why wouldn't they move production?
I think
there's literally like nobody is going to make them keep it here. They're going to do that.
I think it's a few things happening at once. The big one is 2019 is when they're negotiating with the auto workers union. All the articles gloss over this shit, but they went out of their way to say, well, this is dependent on our negotiation, which means they are going hard to fuck over the union. So the union is forced to compromise on some other position, and only 2 of the 3 factories closed or something like that. This is 100% an attempt to put the union over the barrel before negotiations start. And the media just ate it up and put it out there, which gives them more power in the negotiation. 2, they are trying to refocus on things that are more profitable. So a lot of these factories are producing cars that aren't doing well. But rather than, again, because it's run by capitalists instead of labor, so rather than doing what Ford is actually doing, which is taking the factories and converting them to make electrified vehicles, they're just shuttering them entirely because it allows them to get rid of union workers, reducing their costs and moving it overseas, which is what they're going to do. And then I think 3, and this one is a bigger concern for me, I think a lot of indicators right now that the economy is about to slam to a halt in the next 10-ish months, and they're trying to build up a bunch of cash reserves. So that way, when this all goes through, next year, if the economy tanks, their end-of-year results won't be as bad because they did this move. And they're trying to shore up stock prices ahead of time. So I actually think it's a combo of the UAW plus they're afraid the economy's about to turn. I will say, if these go through and they cut a shitload of jobs in the spring, which is about when this would happen, yeah, that's going to be the end of the economy tanking. And it's way more hollow this time than it was in '08, so it's going to be rough. It's going to be real rough this time.
Yeah, that's yeah, I'm trying
Sorry,
to think
guys.
of like I'm trying to think of like a good
Outro,
snark
everybody.
thing, and nope, I got this is gonna be fucking dark.
Listen,
There it is again.
Here's the main thing. This is why you organize, because these aren't locked in yet as a result of them having to get them by the union. Now, are they doing this in order to put the union in a shitty position? Yes. But they could just make these things happen at the drop of a hat if the union wasn't there. The union is one of the few things protecting these people. It's one of the only reasons they're making good money in the first place. More people should be organizing. More people should be striking, and better wages can be had. But this is also why labor is important. Labor needs to work together, because you can't ever fucking trust capitalists to take care of you.
Yeah, I just
Ever.
like to point out that like it's tragic what's happening in these jobs. But to your point about not being able to trust capital to take care of you, the dynamic we're seeing played out at a macro level right now of like nationalists versus capitalists, it just reminds me of like dudes in their 20s that think the stripper's in love with them. Like when America was the location that all worldly capital was centered around, it was like, man, this is great. I think if I just keep doing what I've been doing for the last 18 hours, I could live this life infinitely. And then capital, as capital does, goes to where profits are greater on the other side of the world, or dispersed, or in all the ways that they shelter their own wealth, right? They fuck off, and now we're having to grapple with, well, wait a second. If this wasn't the one love of my life, what am I supposed to do in this fucking disaster that follows after all the poor decisions I made over the last X amount of time? And I think the answer is, like you said, some amount of organizing fucking right now.
Oh, yeah. Right this goddamn second. Because there's a reason all of the other new auto plants are built in the South, and it's because there's no unions down there.
Mm-hmm. Well, God, those were a nightmare.
They are. The entire corridor of northern Alabama and northern Georgia is auto manufacturing plants. And none of them treat their employees particularly well unless they were grandfathered in. But we're going to talk more about labor issues in the future. So I just want to make sure we talk about this, because this is a big fucking deal. 15,000 people are about to get screwed by capital just cause. And I do want to say this one last bit. When the government bailed them out, they could have forced them to put union workers on the board. They could have restructured GM in a way where the workers owned a significant chunk of the company, and they didn't. They restructured it, they made it a beautiful capitalist system again, and then they fucked right off.
Thanks, Obama. What, we're not doing that anymore?
I mean, he asked for it this week, wasn't he the one who was like, listen, America
Jesus.
produces so much oil now, you should be thanking me.
He literally said, "Thank me for that." Like, no.
All right, if you
No,
insist.
Is he completely tuned out right now? Like,
He's clearly
you should
hanging out
thank
with too
him
many
for
rich
that
people.
right now. He's just like he's like windsurfing too much. Like,
Before we leave, Anna has brought us a delicious recipe that she's going to explain, and we'll post a link up.
Oh, word?
yes.
All right, hold on. I got 2 plastic forks and a paper Dixie bowl from last night that appears to have bude jjigae left over. Is that enough to make the recipe?
Yeah, actually, probably.
All right.
Hell yeah.
You
Probably.
got my attention.
You might be okay. You might be okay. You do not need a mixer at all for this recipe. It is an olive oil cake. So one of my first jobs in the city, I worked at a place with this olive oil cake that we made for the wine bar.
Stereotypical
and
Greeks everywhere.
This was Italian, actually. This was Italian. But it's got like so much olive oil in it that if you don't like watch it as you're pouring it into the pan, it's going to totally separate on you. But once you get the hang of it, it's ridiculously good. I posted a picture yesterday where I made it with some Tom Cord grapes for the cookie plate at work. Really pretty, really delicious. You can put plums in it before too. But basically, yeah, it's fantastic. You can kind of tweak it a little bit, but not too much, because it's kind of touchy with it's just like so much olive oil in it. So, you guys want me to like give the actual like recipe, or just basic rundown?
Just basic rundown, and then we'll post up the actual details.
Okay. So you're going to take eggs and sugar, and you're going to whisk them together with the zest of one citrus fruit of your choice. So, like orange, lemon, Meyer lemon, which is like a cross between a mandarin and a lemon, really floral, in season right now. All awesome. So you get those whisked together, nice and even. Then you're going to drizzle in some olive oil and whisk it in. You don't want to work any air into this. You want it super dense. You're going to whisk in some milk. And then you're going to take all your dry stuff, your flour, your salt, your leaveners, like your baking powder, baking soda, and whisk it in gradually. And the method here, when you're making a cake that you're not using a mixer for, you want to add your dry, like little circles around the edge of the bowl with your whisk, just to kind of gradually get it in so you have no lumps. And then as you're pouring it into your pan, you want to keep whisking it so you don't have sugar. There's a lot of sugar in the recipe. You don't want it sinking and sticking. Yeah, it's like, it's super, it's like the olive oil and the salt in it balance it. It's not super sweet, but it's like so moist from just the sugar content in the olive oil. Awesome with fruit in it, awesome with chocolate sauce, awesome with whatever fruit you have on hand on the side. Just a really good, super, like, use really good olive oil, like splurge for something nice. Greek olive oil is my favorite. Spanish is pretty good too. Italian can be adulterated by the mob, so you got to know it's good stuff. It actually can. That's a whole thing. The mafia has their fingers in a lot of the food coming out of Italy, so you have to look for a certain label.
That's awesome. You guys should do a breadline pod about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, we might maybe as a premium app once we get to doing those.
Yeah, you should talk to my Uncle Stosh. He's a Italian adjacent Pole, and he's got the best zucchini around. If you know what the fuck I'm talking about, and I'm talking about literal organic zucchini.
That's awesome.
That is the good shit right there.
Is this thing finicky to bake?
No, once you have it in the oven, it's a very liquidy batter. So, you know, when you're checking it and you want to rotate it, just kind of give it a poke. If it's still really liquidy, let it go for a little while longer before you start rotating it.
Awesome.
And it's so dense that, like, if you're not 100% sure if it's done when you poke it, like, you can leave it for another few minutes and it's not going to dry it out. It's gonna be fine once it comes out. But I've used this, like I said, I baked plums into it and served it with, like, whipped mascarpone and pine nuts and basil.
Fuck, sounds good.
I did one last winter with it where it was with, like, honey fried pears and chestnut honey ice cream and, like, a little pecorino fried crispy thing. So it goes great. I mean, olive oil goes with everything, so it goes with everything.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and I had to...
It, be sure to at very small Anna, or
please make it.
And make sure you hashtag with Crumbshot.
Yeah, Crumbshot. Let me see your Crumbshots.
Oh fuck! She asked for it.
All right.
There are way too many people who really are going to enjoy me saying that.
Hold on, I'm very frantically scrubbing my Ezekiel bread crust onto a nice white plate. This is my bread tribute to Anna.
You can also hashtag it bread tribute.
Yeah, I will take bread tributes.
Oh, that's awesome. All right.
DMs are open.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all next week. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And be sure to listen to the Breadline Pod when the next new episodes come out.
Soon.
Word.